Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of my series, video, whatever you want to call it, Josie Mystery. Not even sure if I'm going to keep the name Josie Mystery, but I'm just going with it for now. So, this episode is all about my first and only Sasquatch encounter. Now, this doesn't include times that I believe that it was around me or times that I thought I heard it. This just includes an eyewitness account that I've had. I have seen it. And I just wanted to talk about that. And I want to make multiple videos of it, just getting into it. I'm sure I can't explain everything all in one video, but I'm going to try my best to talk about it and give you all of the encounter as much as I can. So, out of everything that I've ever experienced, by far, witnessing and seeing a Sasquatch is definitely the top of all of them. It tops all of them for me because number one reason why is because it's something that people constantly tell you doesn't exist. It's society tells you it doesn't exist. It's comparable to Santa Claus or a unicorn. 90% of people that I encounter on a day-to-day basis that I would reveal this to, which sometimes I do, because if I'm trying to form a friendship or a bond with somebody, or if I just like someone in general, and I'm gonna kind of reveal a little bit of myself to you, and if you want to know me, you know that I'm all about this stuff, and that I did have an encounter. I don't shy away from it. I don't kind of keep it very to myself. If we're just talking about things and if Bigfoot comes up or we're all in the woods or something, I'm going to tell the story. Because number one, I think people should kind of be open to the idea. I think that I do want people to be cautious and aware that they are in the woods. And a lot of the time, 90% of the time, I get just strange looks, mostly radio silence. It's just silence, move on to the next subject. Sometimes I'll get a little nervous laugh. Most of the time, 90% of the time. Now, the other percent of the time, I get a lot of curiosity. I get a lot of questions. People want to know the story. They get all into it, and those are like my people. Like, we're gonna get along, I feel like, very well if you're kind of into it like I am. I think there's just a lot of nervousness I feel around it. It's just kind of taboo. I don't know if I would get the same reaction if we were talking about like Christmas and I'm like, oh yeah, Santa Claus exists. I saw him. Or I was in the woods. Yeah, I saw a unicorn. Yeah, I don't know if I would get the same uneasiness as if I said I saw a Sasquatch. I feel like there's just a little bit more unease with that because it is a human. It is a humanoid, and I feel like a lot of the time it's mostly outdoors people or like religious people who get, I feel, the most nervous out of everybody. And I can see why. If anything, um, it kind of would dampen their life a little bit, like somebody who's an outdoorsman or outdoors person, um, somebody who goes hunting. They are going to be probably the most weary or just, I guess wary is not the term, I'm sorry, more like standoffish about it because they don't want something like that to make them, less likely to go in the woods or to scare them, essentially. Now, with religious people, I feel like there's a fear there because they equate them maybe with humans and they think, well, God only made humans. There's no other type of human. There's no other species of human running around out there. I'm not sure. Maybe they don't. I'm not sure, but I feel like with religious people, kind of like when you talk about aliens, I feel like anything that they feel doesn't follow along with the Bible is something that it makes them just, it doesn't make them, feel comfortable. Now, I have a Bible in my lap right now, and I'm on the flood, and I'm not religious particularly, and I don't go by the Bible very much. I'm open to what people believe in it, and I feel like there are My personal opinion is I feel like there are some truths in here, but I just don't trust a human writing completely all of God without creating some false information, because just humans are just so, I hate to say it, but a lot of humans are just corrupt, and they want things to be the way they want it to be. And I feel like even if God was talking to them, I feel like there's no way that 90% of humans are going to follow through with what God says. Maybe some things in the Bible are true, but there's books that were written that aren't even, that were removed from the Bible. I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, but like the book of Enoch, there's things that were taken out and things that are probably hidden in the church. I don't know. I'm not super educated on all that, but that's just my opinion, because there's just so many things in the Bible that just don't make any sense and don't align with the message that's being given. With that being said, anyway, so what confuses me though about religious people is Bigfoot really do align with things like the Nephilim and other creatures that are mentioned in the Bible. They do kind of follow along with that, so it could be even more proof that there are many truths in the Bible and that the Bible is accurate in a lot of ways. So anyway, back to what I'm saying. I'm on the page. I'm on the 7th page in Genesis 6:20. I'm at the flood, and number 4 says there were giants in the earth in those days. And it goes, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, so the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bare children to them. The same became mighty men, which were of old, men of renown. So, yeah. So, and then it just goes on to say, and God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination of thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And it repented the Lord that he had made man on earth, and it grieved him at his heart. Totally believe that. I think God would be deeply upset of the evil in humanity that certainly exists. And for that reason, I think that the Bible isn't completely accurate, because I think there's just so much evil. It's such an old book. There's no way that evil things couldn't have been added onto it throughout the years, but that's just my opinion. Now, there's a book that really, really delves into this. It's called, oh gosh, what was it called? I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to look it up. Oh, Genesis 6 Conspiracy, I think that's what it's called. It's a really good book, and it's just gets really into this stuff. So anyway, this is far, far off topic. I'm talking about my Sasquatch encounter. I don't mean to get into religion or anything like that. I'm just saying that this kind of the reaction that I get from people, which is completely off topic. Anyway, all right, let me get right into the encounter. So it was 2002. For the longest time, I thought it was 2001. I don't know. Maybe because I associate it with such a crazy time that, with 9/11 and everything. I don't know why I always thought that, but I was definitely in 4th grade. I know that for sure. Because I did go up to some classmates and said, "Hey, I did see Sasquatch." And of course, I got the, "Oh, you did? Oh, okay." Like, they were laughing and made fun of me and stuff like that. So it was definitely 4th grade. Which 4th grade was just awful, awful, awful for me. I was just dealing with a lot of like trauma stuff and things like that, and trying to work that out. And I wasn't getting the help that I needed, but that is, once again, off topic. So it was 2002. So if you got to think back, there's no phones. Well, there are like flip phones, but they're not like what we have today. They do have a camera on them, but they're not super great or anything like that, and we certainly didn't have them as kids. We didn't have like the kids these days with iPods. We definitely didn't have anything like that. We didn't have flip phones. I don't think we started getting them until like preteen years. So I was 10 years old at this time. My sisters, I believe, were 8 and 7. My little brother, I believe, was in the house. My mom was asleep in the house. And we were outside. Well, I wasn't outside. If I didn't come out at the moment that I did, it would have been, I never ever would have seen it. Anyway, so we had just moved, I believe, a year or two prior to this house. And back then in Erie, Pennsylvania, there was just a lot more woods. There was, like the woods across from us was just full. And now it's completely bulldozed, and there's like a McDonald's there, and, all these different grocery stores and just stores in general. And before it was a woods, and there was behind us, we lived in probably about like a 5 or 10 at most acre woods. And they had built a nursing home in the far back. And I think this was about the time that it was being built. There was also other areas around us there was a lot more trees and little forests and things like that. And it was a great time to be a child. It was a great time to be alive and growing up in those times. And I know for a fact that they're just vastly different now. They're just not the same. There would just be so much more animals and activity. In fact, one of the first couple days, maybe the first week that we moved in, when we went to school, my little brother was too young to go to school, I think. And he was home. Or no, he was sick or something like that. I'm not sure, but he was home. We were all at school. And I remember being so jealous because there was a big black bear that came up. Well, I don't know how big it was, but it was a black bear that was circling the house and trying to get inside or something, maybe looking for garbage. And I'm not sure what happened with that. I don't know. Could it be that black bear that they saw was a Sasquatch? And I just questioned my brother on that a lot. But he claims that yes, it was a black bear, and it was circling the house, and we had never seen it again, which is kind of weird. Now, there's something just way creepy, not creepy, I don't know, there was just something really kind of, I don't know, mysterious about this house. I feel like there's a lot of history there. Unfortunately, like the other houses that we lived in the area, I believe it's going to be bulldozed as well as this woods. But oh my gosh, now it's like a dead place. I tried going in there sometimes to just check it out and look for clues, and there's actually just this crazy kid in there that just hates it. And I don't know if he really owns it. I don't think he does, but he just completely is just mean, and I feel like evil. We actually found in there the N-word carved deeply, very deeply onto a tree. And when I was in there with my sister, we tried, my sister mostly, she did a good job of just scribbling it out. We don't know. There's just some really bad apples in there now. I don't know what's going on with that, but I personally always wanted to make it into a park or where the people in the far neighborhood can go and take their dogs and just take a little walk, because that's what I did growing up. Despite this happening, I was never scared of the woods. I mean, sometimes, I think it's because I had a dog with me, but I was never too afraid. And we continued to go in there even after we saw the bear. There would be bugs, just so many different types of bugs, fireflies, it was abundant. Like every time you go outside, you could see something, whether it's, of course you would see squirrels, but different types of birds and snakes and salamanders and toads. And there was just so much more of abundance of life. The creek now is almost completely dried out, but when we were kids, there was like a waterfall, and there was little fish in there, minnows, and I think little leeches. I'm not sure what they were, but there were so many of them, little black worm type things. There was just so much life in there that is just wasn't the same. There's a lot of a plant that I think that the Bigfoot eat, because they would grow, and they still grow pretty abundant there along the creek, and that was a mayapple, and I think that that's what they were after. Of course, I don't know. I can have to double check if it was fall. Hang on a minute. When do mayapple grow? Mayapple start emerging in early spring. The fruits manufactures in late summer. So that is interesting. I mean, it's in late summer. So this did happen in fall. So maybe that's what they were foraging. Now, there were clues beforehand. When we moved in, This did happen in fall, probably around this time. Probably late October, because there were so many leaves on the ground. It was so beautiful. It was just incredible. And so in one of the winters, I think maybe the previous winter or that winter, I'm not sure, our dog came back with a leg of a deer, and there's no way that she killed a deer and took the leg off. It looked like the leg had been ripped off, and she went in the woods and she came home with a ripped deer leg. We even have a picture of it, and it was very weird. It's the one and only time that's ever happened, but it did happen. And I think that summer or spring before, there was just, we were walking in the woods as we did as kids, all alone, but it was a small woods and it's not like we could really get lost. We had known it pretty well. And the dog, not the dog, we were just walking through and we found a dead, or just a random dead raccoon in there. And that could have been, related. Because why do you just find a random dead animal? There was no wound on it. Nobody had touched it. It was actually freshly dead. And I was just thinking, maybe it got hit by a car and was put here, But it wasn't shot. It wasn't anything like that. It was just randomly dead. I don't know. I mean, of course animals die, but it didn't look particularly old. Could have had rabies. I don't know. We had no business touching it and messing with it, but I did think it was alive for a time, and I pet it because it just was so freshly dead. But anyway, this is way off the topic, but it could have been from that. My mom would hear, when we first moved in, she would hear these men talking in a really weird language. And from vaguely in my memory, I did hear it too. I do think it was the guys in the other part of the woods who lived there. I do think it was them. But it could have been something else. I do remember hearing strange monkey-like noises, but it could have been a bird. Some birds, they do kind of sound like monkeys sometimes. I'm not sure which ones in particular, but, they do, birds do cackle and make a, monkey-like noise sometimes. Even, dogs make a monkey-like noise. So those were, the first kind of clues. And then, so anyway, let me get into, it's already 17 minutes and I haven't even gotten into the encounter. I might have to just make a whole nother video. So I'm sorry guys, thank you for sticking with me. Anyway, so I was in the house. We were at the edge of the cliff, and it's not a cliff, it's like a hill. It's a smaller hill, maybe about 15 feet high, not even, maybe 10. It was definitely higher than it is now. And it kind of dipped into the creek. Where the creek was, there was two high, little hills. And so I went outside because I was bored or something, and I saw my sisters at the edge of the hill. And they were staring at something. And I thought, one of them I did see they had a butterfly net, and I think it was a project for school or something. And I walked up to them and I was like, or maybe it wasn't a net, maybe it was a little cage. And I was like, oh, what are you guys doing? And they're like, we're looking for, maybe this was before they were staring down. Actually, I think maybe this was a little bit before. So they were just hanging out over there looking for bugs. And I was like, hey, what are you guys doing? And they're like, we're looking for bugs. And I was like, oh, okay. So I ran in the house. I got my favorite net that I could catch all sorts of things because there was just so much more life back then. And I hate to keep repeating that, but it really was that way. And so I grabbed it. I went back outside. I just remember the door. I just remember my hand on the door, the not the main door, but the screen door. And I was just looking at them. And then I knew something wasn't right. That's when they were staring down at the hill. And I was like, what is going on? And I went to them and I was like, what do you see? And they're pointing. They're like, oh, it's a black dog. It was a crazy black dog chasing its tail. And I was thinking, oh, maybe it's, and I also should mention we did find in the creek a part of a dog skull, the dog jaw. And it was definitely a dog. It wasn't a deer. I mean, it could have been, but I highly doubt it. I remember looking at it and I remember there was a sharp tooth at the end. So it was definitely a dog. And so we thought that maybe someone had buried their dog there or something, but it was definitely in the creek. It was in the mud, and it was definitely, I think, a dog. And I find that very strange looking back now, that you don't see any part of the skeleton, and it was a dog, and it was just one piece of the jaw that was like buried into the mud of the creek. And so down the creek where the Bigfoot was, there was like a little homeless encampment that sometimes you would see some like blue tarps, and there wasn't a lot of them. And sometimes in the vine patches, you would see alcohol bottles. So there was definitely some people living in there. But so they were the Bigfoot was kind of towards that area, and towards that area is kind of where the creek like dipped into and kind of created like a pool. And there was just a lot more water at that end than any other part of the creek. And now it's been on countless encounters I've listened to, and people who have spoken about this, they say that the Sasquatch love water, and you will find these creatures most often around water. Why that is, I'm not sure. Something else to just dive into. Maybe I can make a whole episode on that. Why are these things so attached to water? And it could be that I thought later, thinking on it, it definitely covered up its footprints. I will say that, because if you're stepping in water, the chances of seeing its footprint is very small. And so anyway, so it was in that part of the creek, and I was just like looking, and I just couldn't see anything, and there were just so many leaves everywhere. And eventually I was just waiting, and eventually I could hear it, and it did kind of feel like time slowed. I will say that it felt like time slowed. Some people say that everything quiets and they can't hear everything. I do remember it being pretty quiet, but I can't say for sure if we stopped hearing the traffic in the distance or anything like that. I can't say that for sure, but I could say that it was fairly quiet, and there was a huge sound. It just sounded almost like it wasn't as loud as a train, but it was very loud. It sounded like a car driving in the woods, or a bulldozer or something driving in there. And then I was like, okay, that is really weird. And that's when I started getting weirded out, when I heard the loud noise, and something was definitely rustling in there, and it was too loud to say that it was a dog. And then finally, out of nowhere, down the creek, I started to see something walking towards us. And at first, I laughed, and I thought that it was a teenager. First of all, there's no doubt in my mind that I thought it was a human. Not once did I think it was a bear. Not once did I think it was anything. I thought it was a human. It walks like a human. And at first I was like, and this is when time really started to feel like it slowed. I mean, this couldn't have been more than a minute, maybe, the encounter, maybe 2 or 3. But this felt like 30 minutes at least. And I was looking at him. I was like, oh my God, that is the greatest costume ever. I thought it was for Halloween. And I thought it was like a guy on stilts. He had to have been on stilts, because this thing was so inhumanly tall. And I did not think again for once that it was a bear, but it definitely had that black. If you look at a black bear, its fur is so dark. Well, their fur is generally dark. And the way their legs are, they're just big legs, and sometimes they do stand up on 2 feet. Sometimes they can walk on 2 feet. But just the way like the legs are, they're big legs. And the way their body is kind of like more fluid and flexible, kind of like a cat more than a dog. That part kind of reminded me of a black bear, but the hood, I thought it was a hood. At first, I thought it was like a teenager and wearing some kind of all black suit. I definitely thought it was some kind of costume or a hoodie. And it's a very, very cone-shaped head. If you look at a gorilla's head, it's the most similar thing that I can compare it to, is a gorilla's head. And it was very pointed. And unlike a gorilla, it had a very, very flat human type face. And from a distance, I couldn't see if it had eyes. I couldn't see a mouth. And I think now that it was just too far away. And I believe that after school. This was like probably, I would guess, like right before dusk or at dusk. So there's enough light that if you looked, you probably could see a glint of an eye shine, a mouth, maybe a nose. I didn't see any of that. And so that's why I want to make another video on are they shapeshifters? Can shapeshifters turn into these things? Was it morphine or whatever? Was it going through a portal? Was it transforming? I don't know, but I have heard multiple encounters of people saying the same thing, that they saw the same type of creature where they just, for the life of them, could not find a face. And that's what I was doing. I mean, it was far. I want to say it was like 20 feet away. It was very close. It was literally just right down the hill, walking in the creek. And so I just remember trying my hardest to look for a face, and I couldn't see it. And maybe because I was 10 years old, I wasn't necessarily afraid of it. Now, I think I would have been more afraid if it was a man or a creepy looking man or one of the homeless people. I honestly, in my heart, think I would have been more afraid if it was just like one of those homeless men that looked like he was drinking or something. I honestly think I would have been afraid of that because I was 10 years old. But there was no real reference for me. I wasn't super into Bigfoot at all. The only thing I could compare it to, the only Bigfoot that I knew of and that I thought of instantly, was the Bigfoot on the Goofy movie. And which is kind of weird that I connected it to that so quickly. And that was the only thing I can compare it to at the time. And I just kind of thought that it was Bigfoot. I knew right away, I think, at that point. The closer it got, the more I could see there was no costume, there was no stilts. It was moving so fluidly. There's no way it could have been wearing stilts. And it was moving on the water, in the water. And I knew. You just know. You know right away there's something wrong. You can't make any excuses anymore. You can't say, oh, it's a bear. You can't say, oh, it's this or that, a guy in a costume. There comes a point when you're looking at it for so long that there's no way, even as a child. And I was more curious of it than anything because I was so deeply, this is why I think it's because I was so deeply into Pokemon and creatures, and we were into like Harry Potter and things like that. So it interests me more than anything. And I was into like, Steve Irwin too, and the way that he would go out and look for really crazy creatures, all over the world. And I think Jeff Gorwin is his name. He would go all over the world and look for strange creatures. So it didn't really, I kind of thought it was more, I started to think of it more as an animal once I registered that it was Sasquatch, even though now that I look back on it, I believe that it's very, very human. There's no animal so human, if you want to call it an animal or a cryptid, is Bigfoot. There's so much human about it that when I first saw it, I thought it was a human. And I got the sense that it was a teenager, a male. It was definitely male, and it was definitely like late teens, early 20s. He was pretty skinny. And I don't know why he was there. Maybe he could have been like a rogue Sasquatch or something, because I didn't see any other Sasquatches or see any evidence of any other ones around. Now, they will tell you constantly when you see one, there's usually a couple nearby. We've never seen another one again, except for one time my brother did see it, and I will go into that afterward, because I think that happened after. I can't be sure, but I'm pretty sure that happened afterward. But it was the same one. I'm going to guess it was the same one. And now looking back on it, I do believe that Ed had been watching us for quite a while, because it seemed fairly comfortable with us for some reason. And I feel like if it something, maybe it was the homeless people, they were drinking or something. Maybe it was the landlord who kind of lived down the wooded driveway. But something had spooked it, I believe, because if nothing spooked it, it could have easily stayed where it was and nobody would have seen it. If it would have stood still or just laid on the ground, you never would have known it was there. And I mean, of course, where it was more towards the busy road, like near the Mill Creek Mall. So, which at the time was a lot more wooded between our woods and the mall, but it it was still fairly close. It was, I am telling you right now, I lived in Washington State for I think 8 or 9 years, and I was living in Port Angeles of all places. I've went to the whole rainforest, Round Forks area. I would take trips and go to the beach and things like that, and like Ruby Beach, like way at the tip of Washington, and I would go to all these places around there, and I lived like really more in the country, and I would take long walks on abandoned logging trails and things like that in the mountains. And let me tell you, I have never seen a Sasquatch, have never heard one, never had any evidence of one ever. So this happened, and this is what I've come to find out. I really do believe that Sasquatch love to live in the suburbs, like in wooded areas where maybe they have access to garbage cans or things like that, or get very curious of human society. I'm not sure, but I've come to believe that I really do think you're so much more likely to see them in a green belt or in a wooded area around society than in the middle of nowhere. That's just my opinion. And there's been other encounters that are similar, where they're in similar locations. I don't know quite why that is, except maybe there's a lack of food and and I also found out that a lot of encounters happen usually in the fall with Bigfoot, and I believe that's because that's like their migration pattern. So, what was I getting into? Okay, so anyway, it was crossing us. My sister distinctly remembers its hands. Now, bears don't have hands. This thing had hands. She distinctly remembers it with hands kind of like a Scooby-Doo villain. Like he's trying to sneak away. And his hands are kind of up in front of him, and they're curled. Kind of like just very cartoonish. And its hair was... It's kind of hard to describe because it's kind of like a black bear's hair, and it's kind of like maybe a black cat's hair. It's hard to describe. It's just a lot shorter, and it looked very thick and pointy and just short, especially on its face. I looked the most at its face because I just remember I just wanted to connect with it. I just wanted to interact so bad because I knew at 10 years old that this is it. This is the moment. It was like looking at a celebrity. This is the thing that everyone's been trying to find for the longest time. I really felt like it was just like looking at a celebrity, and for a moment, I thought that maybe this was the only one. This is the one everyone's been looking for all this time. And I do remember for a short second thinking, it reminded me so much of the Shadow Man. I don't know if you know who the Shadow Man is, but he usually appears in dreams, very lucid dreams. And I have had dreams of the Shadow Man since I was a child. They're just very real, very lucid. And I can make a whole video on that. And so I kind of almost compared it to that just because of how black it was. It was blacker than black. Like it absorbed all the light. And I don't know if that's why I couldn't see its face, because its eyes were so deep in the fur and it was so dark that I couldn't see it, but I literally saw nothing but just short, spiky black hair all over its face. Cone-shaped head. I did not see a face at all. I did not see any evidence of a nose, of eyes, of a mouth while it was coming towards us, and while it was passing us so slowly, I felt. Its side of the face, I don't remember seeing an ear. I don't remember seeing anything but just this black. That's why I think maybe it was a shifter, or maybe it was like something pretending to be a Sasquatch. I don't know. Maybe I just literally could not see it because maybe its ear was very small and it was so hidden in the fur, and maybe because it was staring, it did not look at us. It was just staring straight ahead the whole time. It did not turn its head to look at us. It in a way it kind of ignored us, but it really did ignore us. So, and we were children. And so sometimes they say they get very curious of children. So I don't know if I don't know if something spooked it to come over and reveal itself to us, because it didn't have to do that. We never would have seen it if it didn't walk that way. Or it literally, it wanted to reveal itself to us. There was nothing that spooked it. It just saw us, it heard us there, and it just wanted to show itself, but it didn't stare at us. I don't remember. I mean, it wasn't, I don't even think it was looking at us, because I didn't really feel any eyes on us. It was so oblivious to us. Maybe it was blind. I don't know. It was just very oblivious to us. And our dog, Ruby, she was a lifesaver, because I don't know what would have happened if she wasn't there, because she was scaring me. The way that she reacted to this thing, the moment she saw it, till long after it sunk into the ground, technically, her hair was on end. She was barking like crazy. While I was trying to roll down the hill, I was sliding. I got on my butt and started scooting closer to it. I was so scared, but at the same time, I just wanted to interact with it so bad. And I was just grabbing stones or whatever I could find. I threw something its way. And I remember feeling a little fear there, and like, oh, maybe I shouldn't do that. And my dog was sitting, or she was standing right beside me. It was me sitting down on the hill towards it, and her just, oh my gosh, she was just going crazy. I've never seen her that way. She was a golden retriever. And sweetest thing. Never did that to anybody. She didn't even really bark. And she was just going crazy. And I looked at her and I was like, well, if she's feeling this way about this thing, maybe I should feel the same way. So I got back up. I even remember my sisters, I think they were getting a little worried, and they're like, what are you doing, sort of thing. And they were younger than me. And I was just so curious. And I knew in my head, I highly doubt I'll ever see one ever again. But I knew, like, this is a moment. This is a moment that will never happen again. And a lot of people will live their lives and they'll never see this. I just knew it was a very rare moment and opportunity to maybe get to know this thing a little bit better, to uncover its mystery and what it really was. And I mean, again, it was a celebrity in my eyes. So what eventually happened is my sister saw this, but weirdly enough, I didn't see it, even though I was looking at it. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I think I got so spooked out that I stopped looking at it. I think it got so intense, the moment, that I looked away from it. Because I think at that moment, the last moment, I realized, that's it. My mom is in the house fast asleep. My dad's not home. We're out there all alone with this thing. Anything, I guess, could happen at that moment. So maybe I got so scared, and I just started to get maybe ashamed of myself for starting to throw a rock at it. I was even talking to it. I was like, hey, what are you? Are you Sasquatch? Are you Bigfoot? I didn't know the term Sasquatch then, I don't believe. And I was like, oh, you're Bigfoot. I think I said a couple things like that. Again, it didn't pay us any attention. Didn't look at me. I couldn't get its attention. Our dog couldn't get its attention. If it wanted to, we were all alone. It could have, in 2 seconds, taken one of us. It could have snapped our necks. I hate to say that. It scares me to think about. But that's why I think these things are a lot less violent and cruel and heartless and just dumb to just do something like that. It had to have definitely known we were all there, especially the dog. But it didn't. And even if it did eat dogs, because we saw that skull, just that piece of jaw, it didn't come up and hurt our dog. I'm sure the dog irritated it, but it didn't, like, it could have been its strength and size. I am telling you, it's about as tall as a tree, a small tree. 8, or I should have mentioned this in the beginning, but it was 8 or, God, maybe even 9 or 10 feet tall. It was giant, especially to us. It was way bigger than any human. That's why I believe it was on stilts. It was giant. It was a giant. And if it wanted to, It could have gotten our dog to shut it up. It could have done anything it wanted to. Anything. It didn't. It didn't pay us any attention. It didn't see us, I think, as food. It could have been trying to get our attention and maybe wanted us to follow it. But I don't think so, because my sister saw this, I didn't. It had gotten on all fours to the ground, and she said it pretty much just morphed and disappeared into the ground. And what that means, I think, is more, it had that combat style, like, it was just fluid. It was so fluid in a way that our joints can't work. We tumble to the ground. This thing was standing, it was flat on the ground, mechanical. And I think maybe it was getting scared. That's why I think maybe it was a late teenager. It was an unexperienced Bigfoot just looking around for food and didn't know what to do. And maybe he was scared, maybe even more scared of us than we were of him. And I think this is why my perception and my openness to Bigfoot is so different compared to somebody who was an adult and saw Bigfoot. And so in my mind, I'm just thinking of it more as a very, very rare creature. And that, everyone needs to find out about this. That's what I thought once it was out of sight. I was like, okay, it's got to be still there. I think my sister was saying it went to the ground. And I think now I remember me asking her constantly what happened to it and not able to grasp what she was saying. I thought maybe she even was lying when she said, oh, it just disappeared in the ground. Because I couldn't grasp that. How could something so giant and so big just disappear into the ground? And I was thinking to myself, oh my gosh, it's getting away. I gotta find this. I gotta tell the world. We were pretty alienated in our situation. We didn't have family around, and we were moving like all the time, and there was like kind of an isolation there growing up. It was just kind of us. And that's why I believe we're so close today, is because we really only had each other a lot of the time. Because sometimes we didn't even go to the same school, and it was hard to make friends when we moved schools. And so we knew that even though we fought a lot too, we knew that we were all we had. And so that's why I think we're still close to this day. And I don't know what I would do without them. Like, I don't know. My siblings are everything. Some people, they stop talking to their siblings when they get older, and that's definitely not us. We've definitely grown closer over the years, and I'm so grateful for that. But I just didn't believe her, and I guess I kind of did eventually when I'm like, okay, well, it's gone. She's right. And it's continuing to go, and I'm like, somebody needs to know about this. The world needs to know. And maybe if we tell the world, we'll get some sort of recognition, or we might get more friends, or we might get fame or something, and it might make our lives better. Because also back then, fame was a huge thing. And I thought that fame, now I have a completely different opinion on it, thank God. I know the truth of fame. But back then, I thought that it meant your life is going to be okay. It meant people are going to love you. It meant you're going to be celebrated. And anyway, I didn't really think that it would be mistreated. I was so naive when I was a kid. Oh my God, I was just so naive, as we tend to be as children. And I never thought, I'm so glad I never called anybody, because I never thought that nowadays I would never tell anybody where they are. I would never tell police or anything like that. I would never get involved in something like that. And I just wouldn't. Because I know that nothing good is going to come out of that. It's not this naive version. Oh, they're going to come over, the media is going to come over the news. Oh my God, you found it. Finally, we found Sasquatch, and they're going to like take pictures with it. It's going to be like the big friendly forest giant. We're all going to get along. We're going to get like a praise for reporting it and spotting it. And like, we were the ones that found it, and we're all going to be friends with it. It's going to like become a part of our society. It's not going to be in a cage or anything like that. It's just going to be like Bigfoot. Oh, Bigfoot's here. Kind of like on the Goofy movie, like whatever. It's Bigfoot. Here it is. It exists. This is great. We're going to celebrate it. that's kind of along the lines of what I thought. And maybe even Steve Irwin would know who we are and would come over to see the Bigfoot. You know, that's just kind of my thinking as a child. And I thought, okay, someone's got to know about this. So our dad comes home, thankfully, shortly after, and he is irritated as heck about something. He's usually a little bit more, he's not usually as irritated when he comes home. Sometimes he'll come home with like treats and things like that, or want to show us what he did during the day. He was an insurance adjuster. But he was mad as heck for some reason. I think because he saw us wandering around outside, and he knew that our mom wasn't watching us or anything, and the dog especially was barking, and the landlord lived not far from us. And I think he was worried that the dog was going to upset him or something, because she was still viciously barking. And my dad was coming out of the car. I think he had his camera wrapped around his neck, because not a lot of people had cameras all the time on them, but my dad did. He carried cameras because that's what he did. He took pictures all the time, and sure, he was an insurance adjuster. So I said, Dad, can I borrow your camera? Bigfoot's down. But we saw Bigfoot, and I was pretty shaken up. But he thought I was lying. He's like, stop lying. Like, get in the house, stop that dog from barking. What are you talking about? Get out of here. That's his reaction to what I said. And I was like, no, please. So he just kind of ignored me, and he went in the house with my sisters. And so I was just left out there, because I was like, no, Bigfoot, we got to take a picture of it. We got to send it someplace. We're going to get help. We're going to get all these good things if we tell the world and show the world that it exists. And I was like, and if it goes away, I just knew I wasn't going to see it again. Like, how are you going to see that again? It's almost like looking at a deer or some other animal, and you're like, okay, once it runs away, once it gets scared, you're not going to see it again. I knew that. So I was like, okay. And it was getting darker now. And I started behind the house, where it must have been towards the other end of the creek. And I remember looking into the woods and just looking for it. And I was like determined. I was like, come on, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. What's it going to do? It didn't hurt us then. It's not going to hurt me now. And I was walking towards the woods, and I got so terrified, especially because I was alone and the dog was in the house. I just got so scared. But all I wanted to do was interact with it. All I wanted to do was get to know what it was. And I was so hurt. And I just remember just going in the house and just feeling almost a little sick. But it's weird that afterward, I don't really have a lot of memory of what happened after. I don't really remember too much of how I felt. I think I literally just went about my life after that. I did tell some people at school, as I said, and they did make fun of me. But I saw it, my sister saw it, my dog saw it. It wasn't anything I made up in my head. And finding shows like The Confessionals and Sasquatch Chronicles and even the Dogman Encounters with Vic Cundiff, like, I'm not alone. And what they describe is so similar. It's just it's a pattern. It's the same thing over and over and over again. It's real, guys. Like, it is realer than real. It's physical. It's not like something like a ghost or an apparition. It's very, very real, and it lives here. Whether it lives in other realms as well, or just here, there's no real telling. There's so much mysterious things going on with this thing. Whether could they be from aliens, the lights that usually accompany them, the strange orbs, the way that they can just move and disappear, the way that they can just, there's something extremely magnificent about them, no matter how ugly people claim they are, no matter how, and some I guess are more hideous, I would say, than others, more monstrous looking, and others are more human looking. They all come in different shapes and sizes, and there's so many different types, but people report the same types over and over again. It's not like they're just making it up off the top of their head. People see the same thing. Ours was a cone-headed, skinny, very tall, completely black, with short, spiky almost hair for especially on its head, and getting a little bit longer as it went down the body. And I do remember it being kind of matted and even a little curled at its butt area and longer over its butt. And that's the best way I can describe it. I never saw its feet. Its hands were human hands. I never saw its face. I never saw its eyes. I never saw its nose, its ears, a chin, really. This head was situated pretty close to the shoulders. I don't believe it had too much of a neck. But it wasn't like one of those that had like no neck at all. And yeah, I think that's where I'm going to end this. It's already been 50 minutes. And yeah, I'm just putting this out there. I know that no matter when you talk about this stuff, sometimes it's a risk because, I know that, Big Brother, I'll call them, knows about these things. And I know that they don't want the information of that getting out. So a mysterious topic that also fascinates me just as much is, what would society do if it was revealed that they exist? And I'm going to make a video on that. It is something that really, really just makes me think. I think about this quite a bit. And I really want to get into all the different options, the different scenarios, I guess what I mean to say, of what would happen. There's so many scenarios. There's so many ways that it could happen. And I think it'll happen one day when it's meant to. Maybe it won't, but I think for the most part, it is going to happen when it's meant to. And I don't believe in coincidences. Anyway, I'm definitely going to wrap this up. It's almost been an hour. Please take care of everyone. Just watch where you go. Watch for these things. I don't think they're as to be feared as most people think. I don't think they're going to kill you. 90% of the time, they're not going to kill you. I think there are incidences when that does happen, but for the most part, I don't think, it didn't hurt us. And they're not as opportunistic, crazy hunters that we make them out to be. I think they have a large capacity for compassion and understanding, and especially when it comes to humans. I think they'll hunt an animal like nothing, and they won't even think about it. Actually, they might. Actually, I do think they do think about it. I do think they are aware when they hunt. I think that they appreciate the meat more than humans do. I think they're extremely intelligent, and I think that the closest thing that I can compare them to is we're like maybe the cats or bobcats of the humans, and they're like the lions and the tigers of the humans. There's just something so grand and magnificent about these things that make us look like the house cat. And I think they're like a tiger looking at a house cat, maybe with just more compassion and intelligence. They know that they're of the same species and they're not going to hurt them most of the time. They can, but I think they have just a lot more compassion than just a straight carnivore. I think they're omnivores. I think they forage almost just as much as they hunt, and they have but they have compassion. They do. And there's many episodes and encounters that prove that. They have intelligence in their eyes. They're very aware. And another video I want to do is can they be shape-shifting? I don't know. Could we have seen it when it was in the process of acclimating to the earth and growing itself? Maybe it hadn't grown its eyes or nose or mouth yet. Honestly, it's silly. It could be just as simple as it was too far away to see its face, and that by the time it got to us, all I could see was the side of its face because its head was so huge. I couldn't fathom how huge its head was. Our heads are kind of, I don't want to say more flatter in comparison, but like, there's just not a lot of volume in the head. Its face was definitely flat, but maybe it just had more volume on the sides. So when it was passing us, its eyes were looking directly ahead of them. And I couldn't see its face if I wanted to, and you gotta remember how tall it was. So anyway, once again, I'm gonna wrap this all up. I hope that somebody gets some kind of information of this video that helps them, or helps them process their own encounter. Um, and I just wanted to retell it in just um, a better way. I don't know what to say. It's so hard to talk about these things again. I just want to get all the information out there, have it be correct and accurate. And thankfully, with my sisters, I've been able to get it more accurate, because when you do see these things, everybody has a different point of view. Everybody has a different experience, and they see different things of the body. They're looking at different parts of the body. My sister was looking at its hands. My other sister noticed it fall to the ground that I didn't notice. And I paid the most attention to its head. Whether I was just scared and wanted to make sure that everybody was like protected, because if I saw the eyes, maybe I would know its intentions. I don't know. I was the oldest sister in the situation, and I think I had more of a protectiveness going on there. Anyway, I hope you all have a great week. And take care, everyone. And I will be back hopefully soon with the next video. So thank you all so much for watching. If you made it this far, thank you for watching. And I hope this helped you. And I hope this was a good video. So thank you all, and see you in the next video.